Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah Gerther, and I'd like to welcome you to the third webinar of the post-conference webinar series. This webinar series was developed to ensure that knowledge continues to be translated throughout 2019 related to the four conference themes. The title of this webinar is Campaigning, the Best Way to Address Ageism. And this will be presented by Estelle Uche, Campaign and Project Officer at Age Platform Europe. Age Platform is based in Europe and is a network of and for older people committed to advocacy and advancing the policy and program needs of older people. Now, Estelle, I'd like to welcome you, and please get started with your webinar.
Thank you, Hannah. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I don't know where you're joining from on the globe. Thank you for attending this webinar. So just let's get started. Okay. So before I kick off with my presentation, I'd like just to ask you a question to get a sense of what are your expectations with this webinar. So Anna, if you'd like to proceed with the question. Yeah, so you can basically answer the first question before this webinar. I believe campaigning can help to challenge ageism, or I doubt that campaigning can help to challenge ageism. I need to know more about ageism first. I need to know more about campaigning first, or other if you're unsatisfied with the four first proposals. Okay, Anna, I think we can proceed. So it seems that like most of you believe campaigning can help to challenge ageism, but that you would like to know more about campaigning first. So hopefully this presentation will give you a bit of insights, but maybe as an introductory comment, I'd like to say that I'm not an expert in campaigning, I'm not an expert in ageism, and I don't think that anyone could claim this. So this is really like a webinar where I would like that at the end of the webinar, this turns into more like a conversation where each of us can actually contribute with his own questions or ideas or proposals, and that we try to move forward with the best way possible. So next slide. This is more or less the table of content for this webinar. So we will first try to agree on ageism, what we are talking about as a baseline. And then we will move to the more campaigning part of the discussion. What is campaigning? And then how can we campaign together? Sorry for the typo, by the way. Then building on the AgeingEqual campaign that Age Platform Europe run last year, I'll present what we achieved. That was definitely a collective achievement. And then I'll present a few lessons that we've learned straight after the campaign, and that we are still learning now a few months afterwards. And as an open-up, let's say, I'd like to present a few next steps on which we could reflect together. We started to think of campaigning to address ageism because we observed that, well, and I'm sure that we're not the only one, that in principle, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national social origin, property, birth, or other status. Yet this is the principle, but in practice, ageism is one of the most, if not the most widespread form of discrimination. According to a survey that was run at European level, 42% of Europeans perceive discrimination due to old age, which was described or defined in the survey as being over 55 years old, as very or fairly widespread in their country. So in practice, we see that ageism affects or will affect everyone, if we live long enough. It's the most commonly experienced form of discrimination. Obviously, sexism cannot be experienced by everyone. Ageism is slightly different because we are all aging. Another observation is that ageism is a harmful form of discrimination with negative consequences both on individuals as well as on society. This is a graph that I saw in a presentation given by the World Health Organization when they presented their campaign to combat ageism, and it describes ageism as a concept that is a phenomenon that is composed of 3 dimensions: stereotype, prejudice, and discrimination. I'd like to take a bit of time on this slide, just that we are sure we all agree on the very subtle and sneaky aspects of ageism. Because when we talk about stereotypes, so we talk about the way we think about older people, it's a pretty normal phenomenon, stereotyping. Like, obviously we can't know everything. I mean, there is too much diversity in this world that we cannot grasp the reality, all the reality that is out there. So we need stereotypes, concepts to understand or to get an idea of the world we evolve in. So if someone tells me, oh, I've been to, I don't know, the south of France last weekend and I was amazed by the number of older people working out there, I mean, I'll have an idea coming to my mind when this person tells me there were a lot of older people out there. I don't need to have been there to imagine like the coast with older people walking around. So this is the idea that come up when someone says older people. Then there are prejudice. That's the way we feel about older people. To give you an example, if my landlord tells me, Estelle, your neighbor is moving out, he will be replaced by an old lady that will, I mean, move in as of next month. Well, I'll obviously feel in a certain way to know that my former neighbor is moving out, but I'll also feel in a certain way because I know that this new neighbor is an old lady. And then discrimination is the way we act towards older people. Again, to keep this example of my potential new neighbor, that would be an old lady. The fact that I know that it's an old lady, will I invite her for a beer on Friday evening as I used to do with my former neighbor? Or will I try to be more quiet at night? Or will I act in certain ways because I know that she is above a certain age? So this is the way we act towards someone specifically or in a specific direction because of his or her age. The United Nations Independent Expert on the Enjoyment of All Human Rights by Older People said that unlike other forms of discrimination, ageism is socially accepted and usually unchallenged because of the subconscious internalization of ageist prejudices. The fact that ageism is socially accepted and usually unchallenged, according to the independent expert, is because of this subconscious internalization of the prejudices that we just talked about. So Age Platform Europe used to be, until last year, used to be an organization mainly working in the policy field. And at some point we thought that to bring this subconscious internalization back to consciousness, we needed an awareness raising activity. And this is how we came up with this idea of campaigning last year in the specific context of the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And this is what we thought campaigning could be an interesting complementary activity to bring in the mix and address ageism in a different way. So this brings me to campaigning, the what. Obviously, I'm having the floor today, and I'm very lucky to have the floor because I was very much involved in the organization and the coordination of the AgeingEqual campaign led by Age Platform Europe last year. But we are not the only one to campaign, and we are not the only one taking action against ageism. So before presenting the AgeingEqual campaign, I'd like to give you, it's not an exhaustive overview, but to give you a few examples of campaigning, so that we can try to draw some conclusions or open up our perspectives on what campaigning can be and what campaigning against ageism can be. Age being a European-based organization, obviously most of these examples will be European ones, but I'm sure that you could add your own initiatives and the examples you're aware of in the chat or on Twitter, etc. So feel free to add more examples to the mix. So Cabelos Brancos is an association in Portugal that is committed to develop intergenerational solidarity activities and to challenge the conception of older age in Portugal. Last year, in the frame of the AgeingEqual campaign, they launched this call asking people to take a picture with a sign where they were basically saying that they were against any kind of stereotyping and praising older age as something that we will all hopefully experience and that it can be great. In Belgium, there is this Gang des Vieux en Colère, that is a group that started a year ago to run civil disobedience actions, calling for social justice, tax fairness, and fair pensions for men and women. So it's also a very different way of campaigning because it's not like taking pictures and posting them online. It's more like on the field, participating in protests, yes, organizing sit-in in like big companies, and obviously, well, they dress up, and as you can see on the picture. In France, this campaign Révolution Senior was run by Grey Pride last year, and the objective was to well, they organized an exhibition with a photographer and some volunteers that agreed to be taken to be photographed, taking these suggestive positions to raise awareness that even in older age you can have an active sexual life, and that you should not be excluded or discriminated or stereotyped because of your older age or because of your sexual orientation. So this was more like, yes, an exhibition, something in partnership with the town hall of Paris. In Austria, the Omas gegen Rechts are a group of older women that are meeting up every Thursday in one of the main squares of Vienna to raise awareness of the importance to take action against misogyny, but as well against fascism, anti-Semitism, and all far-right populist developments in their country that they are quite worried about. And in the US, but actually this group or similar groups are also do also exist in other countries. You have Elders Climate Action. It's a group of older people that are committed to fight against climate change and asking governments and decision makers to take action to save the climate. These are examples of grassroots initiatives, but there are also initiatives at a more global level or run by institutions. So again, I'll just go through a few of them. One of them was it started more than 10 years ago by Help Age International. It's called Age Demands Action. They have a beautiful website where you will find tons of resources. By the way, all these pictures have hyperlinks, so you'll be able to visit the websites. The campaign also collected testimonies of people supporting this fight against ageism and again asking governments and decision makers to take action. The World Health Organization has also started in 2016 a global campaign to combat ageism. where again they provide resources about the misconception around aging and older age, where they describe what is the life course approach that they adopt. And again, this was a slide that was presented by a WHO representative in a webinar organized with the International Federation on Aging back in October. And in their campaign, they aim at collecting evidence, building this global coalition to drive change, raising awareness by talking about what is aging, what is ageism, and build this platform for action where people can actually find resources and take action by themselves. At a national level in the UK, Independent Age, it's a charity that is committed as well to fight ageism and stereotypes around older age. They ran last year a campaign called Ageism Plus, and the objective was to show how ageism in combination or in intersection with other either discrimination or other specific life experiences, well, are building different situations in older age for some subgroups. As they say on their website, they aim to showcase diversity, call out prejudice, and find ways of eliminating discrimination for good. But discrimination not only on the ground of older age, it can be discrimination as well on the ground of gender or sexual orientation and everything. So again, this is a print screen of their website, so you'll be able to go through them when we circulate the presentation afterwards. Also launched last year was this campaign initiated by the Benevolent Society in Australia. It's called Every Age Counts. And it's also quite a long-term campaign, a bit like Age Demands Action by Help Age International. They initiated this this pledge that you can sign online, but they also share a lot of policy recommendations, research papers, as well as testimonies and blog stories. Of course, policymakers are invited to commit to tackle ageism, that kind of things. And now we are moving to what I know more or better, the AgeingEqual campaign. So this is a campaign that aimed at raising awareness of ageism, grow our understanding of this phenomenon, what it is, what it implies, why does it exist. We wanted as well to establish, or rather to wake up, a community of anti-ageism activists. We know that some of them were already super active before, but maybe they didn't know each other. So the objective was also a bit to network and to team up, to join forces, to be a bit more impactful. So that's why we initiated new collaborations, and I'll come to that a bit later. And we wanted to infuse other policy dossiers in the sense that we have had this human rights approach with the campaign, and we wanted to take advantage of the campaign to be able to understand how a human rights approach can be useful as well in other policy dossiers where it might be less obvious why a human rights approach is important. So we shared, of course, tons of examples of what ageism is, just for people to be able, and for us as well, to be able to get a sense of what we mean when we talk about such a concept as ageism. And more importantly, we adopted an intersectional approach. So I'll spend a bit of time on this slide because I think it was really key for our campaign to be successful. So we run the campaign from the 1st of October, International Day of Older People, to the 10th of December. That was the date celebrating the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Over this period, we had 10 weeks of campaigning and approximately 70 days. So we decided to split the campaign into 10 different weeks where we would address ageism first as a concept to explain it. So that was the first week, understanding ageism. And then we tried to approach ageism, but from the perspective of different subgroups, if I can say so. So we addressed ageism in interaction with gender, both gender, like men and women, but also gender identity that can be a bit more fluid. Then we addressed ageism and social rights, then ageism and migration, ageism and intergenerational solidarity, where we also teamed up with younger generations to discuss how ageism can also be experienced by younger age groups. We discussed ageism and sexuality, including ageism and sexual orientation. We touched upon ageism and race and ethnical minorities, ageism and abuse and maltreatment. And then we ended with ageism and participation and ageism and disability. So this timeline, you can find it again on the website, and you will see that on the AgeingEqual campaign website, you can go through the different themes with all contributions received per theme if there is one that is more interesting for you than another. With this campaign, we managed to shed light on the consequences of ageism, because a concept as such is, well, this is not what is of interest to us. What we want to understand is why ageism is harmful, and once we can understand that it's a harmful discrimination, then it's a justification to move forward and take action against it. So one of the objectives was also, yes, just to explain the consequences of ageism. And there we shared, or we elaborated on, again, this United Nations input that was, this is a quote from the Open-Ended Working Group on Aging of 2017 that says, although the Universal Declaration on Human Rights proclaims that all human beings are born free and equal, it is evident that the enjoyment of all human rights diminishes with age, owing to the negative notion that older people are somehow less productive, less valuable to society, and a burden to the economy and to younger generations. So again, this comes back to what I was saying as an introductory statement, that ageism, its main consequence is the denial of human rights. So because you age, at some point you're considered too old for something, or too old to behave in a certain way or to adopt a certain lifestyle. So you will be either socially excluded, or you will very bluntly denied some of your rights. It has consequences on different aspects of our lives, on our health and well-being. We usually see that ageism, or research rather, has shown that ageism leads to an undermined sense of autonomy and self-esteem. It leads to a slower recovery from disability when people have a negative perception of older age and aging, and a reduced life expectancy. And when we say reduced life expectancy, research has shown that people with negative attitudes towards older age live on average 7.5 years less than people with positive attitudes towards aging. You can't really see it on the slide, but there are hyperlinks with asterisks after each of these statements, where you can actually find where this statements come from. This is not something that I have invented, obviously. So you have the sources in the slide. Ageism also has an impact on our capacity to contribute to society. Because we have this ageist perception and attitudes, we deny access to educational opportunities, trainings, and work to older people. We struggle in older age to exercise our political rights. It can be due to inaccessible polling stations, for instance, or because nothing is organized for people living in home care settings to go to voting in polling stations. It's also reduced social engagement and an increased late life loneliness. Maybe just to give you an example, people may be like super active in an association for their whole life until they retire, and then somehow the way the association was run or the activities that are offered do not meet their lifestyle anymore, or do not meet their evolving needs and preferences. To be a bit more concrete, I can tell you about this interview that I had with one of the most active HIV positive advocates in Brussels, and he was saying like the LGBTI community in Brussels is super active. It's like very pleasant to see how many things are organized, like the Pride in Brussels is something very big, all of this. But he said as well, like, as I age, maybe I don't want to go to the Pride anymore. I still want to fight for the recognition of I still want to fight against homophobia, but I would like to be able to do it with different actions, and it's not always easy to find room in these groups and these communities to say that maybe some of our activities should evolve, or we should have a more diverse panel of activities to be able to have everyone being able to contribute with their own capacities. And finally, ageism also has consequences on our chances to live a life free from abuse. Just to give one example that was also shared during the campaign, 1/3 of the 8,500 annual homicide of older people in Europe are the results of elder maltreatment. So it's not like only jokes, you know, it's not like, oh, I'm having the senior moment. It's not this. I mean, our ageist prejudices, I mean, at some point, it's so sneaky, so pervasive, so embedded in our institutions, in our mindsets, that it will lead to maltreatment. It can be completely unconscious, but it can be as harmful and as disastrous as homicides, so people's death. These consequences are not the same for everyone. There is a great diversity in the humankind, and this also applies to older age. Just to give you a few examples again, we see that Roma people, for instance, will die 10 to 15 years earlier than most Europeans. Older Europeans with high care needs, 25% of them suffer maltreatment, while those without high care needs, we are rather around 3% share. 1/3 of older LGBTI report having a mental health problem at some point in their lives, which is as well a much higher share than other groups. 28% is the share of older women having experienced some kind of violence or abuse in the previous 12 months. Again, with this intersection of gender and age, we see that in Europe, the gender pension gap is as high as 40%. And finally, a last example on the slide is Black minority ethnic that are diagnosed with dementia 4.5 years younger than their white counterparts. And again, all this is referenced on the campaign website. So if you're more interested in one figure or another, I'm happy to redirect you to the source. So how did we build this campaign, and how can we build future campaigns based on the other examples that I gave you as well? Because obviously we approached this campaign, it was a very first exercise for us, as I said. But it's interesting as well to see other campaigns and to discuss with other organizers of campaigns to understand what are the must do to be able to run a campaign that is not too messy, let's say. So I have like four rules, let's say, that I would apply to myself if I wanted to run a campaign again. The first one is rely on evidence. It doesn't have to be like tons of evidence. It doesn't have to be like, you know, notes at the bottom of your websites that are, you know, tons of them. But you must be able to say like the message that I'm carrying, the reason why I'm putting myself into action is because I have observed this. It can be something that I observed myself, and I can rely on something that I witnessed, or it can be evidence like from research or reports. So on the Aging website, AgeingEqual website campaign, campaign website, for instance, we had a section called Learn, where you could actually look at different, yes, reports and figures and all of this to justify that we're actually calling out ageist behaviors. The second tip would be tell stories. The difference between a policy activity or a policy paper and a campaign is that the campaign must rely on something that you will be able to relate to. You want people to somehow to feel touched by what you're saying. It's not only, you know, cold evidence that you're sharing. You also want to share how this evidence actually translate into people's real life. So this was the case in the AgeingEqual campaign, but in all the other campaigns that I shared, basically, you also had testimonies or or quotes or people just adding their voice to the mix. And this is super important to be able to say, like, you know, if you can't picture what a big concept, a blurry concept as ageism is, well, try to read this story, because this is really the way it translates into people's context. These stories are also super important to show the great diversity of older age, but also of experiences of ageism. One might experience ageism in a way in the countryside of Bulgaria. Obviously, someone like this activist of the civil rights and HIV people affected by HIV in Brussels, this advocate that I met, obviously they have very different realities. It does mean that they cannot be equally impacted by ageism, or that ageism cannot have negative impacts on their lives. But it will materialize in very different ways. The third one would be suggest an horizon. So in our campaign, the positive message that we wanted to bring was we must change our mindsets about aging, and we want people to be able to build another idea of older age. I know, for having talked, for instance, with Le Gang des Vieux en Colère, this Belgium civil disobedience movement, they were saying that our suggestion or our message is to say, we want minimum income or minimum pension, fair pensions for everyone, so that everyone can live in dignity. This is the horizon, but we are not doing this, the job of policymakers. It's going to be up to them to find how we should have a fair income for everyone, so that we can live in dignity. Like we are just activists, so we will say what is the red line for us and what should be the horizon, but we are not the one trying to build the policy response to this. So don't be too stressed by this suggestion horizon. It can sound like you're trying to save the world, but it's more the message here essentially is just to say, let's be utopist as well, and let's define together what we want to achieve, or what is the final goal. And finally, this is a very concrete tip, but I think it's key as well. It's support your community. Campaigning is definitely not something that one can do alone. I did not do this alone. I'm the one speaking today, but my colleagues at Age Platform Europe, our members in different European countries, other civil society organizations and non-discrimination NGOs in Europe also took part. Other activists beyond the European borders as well took part in this. But what is important if you want people to join your movement is that you support your community as much as you can, and that you make their life as easy as you can without controlling what they could do, because it's up to anyone to find the way they can and want to contribute. But you can support them with a frame, let's say, and some tools. So the AgeingEqual campaign being an online campaign, we mainly shared resources to be shared online. So web banners, obviously a website, some visual material like the logo and everything. And we also had this two guides, a guide for supporters and a social media guide, where people could just copy and paste examples of tweets or Facebook posts or that kind of things. Because sometimes people just, a bit of inspiration before they feel confident enough to add their own voice to the discussion and to the campaign. So yes, it was a way to just empower people to be part of this movement. Obviously, if you're having like a campaign that is more happening on the ground, like if you're having a march or a sit-in or that kind of things, well, supporting your community could be like, okay, I offer that we can, I don't know, draw some signs together or prepare some posters to be ready for the march. It's also just about sharing clear information about what is the meeting point, what time do we meet, what is our message. Be as clear as possible in your internal communication with your community as well. So let's move to the results of the campaign. It's very important for me to underline that this was a collective achievement. So on the website, on the campaign website, you can see at the bottom in the footer of the website, there is this partner section that you can visit. And these are basically all the organizations that are presented on that page. These are the organizations that we approached prior to the campaign to ask them whether they would like to partner and share with us their views of how ageism could impact their community or group. Why was it key? It's because aging impacts everyone. Like, we are all aging, but some groups do not necessarily work on these aging issues. So our objective with this campaign was to tell them, well, we give you the opportunity maybe to bring this issue within the discussions of your community. For instance, if I take, I don't know, the European Disability Forum, that is a close partner of AGE. This campaign was for them because we had this week dedicated to ageism and disability. The objective was for them to address two questions. What does it mean to age with a disability, or what does it mean to develop a disability as you age? And what is your experience of ableism, so the discrimination on the ground of your abilities, and what is your experience of ageism when you have a disability? So they discussed this aging and ageism issues with their members. They called for testimonies as well that we could upload on the campaign website, and for us it was as well a way to start a conversation between our respective memberships. So it's super interesting to work in this collaborative approach for the very basic reason that we can speak to the usual suspects. We can speak to the older persons that are already convinced of the need to challenge ageism. But if we want to build a critical mass that will be big enough so that actually we go beyond this sphere of usual suspects, we need to approach groups of people that have never thought of their own aging before, and to explain to them that, or to give them the opportunity to think of what it could or how it could impact their lives at some point. Maybe to anticipate as well a bit what are the discriminations that could add on to their to maybe the discrimination that they're already experiencing, maybe on the ground of gender, sexual orientation, race, or so on and so forth. Well, I won't spend too much time on this slide because obviously it's just figures, but in less than 10 weeks, we gathered about 130 posts on the blog. yeah, well, people were pretty active on Twitter as well with the hashtag, and people keep using the hashtag. So, I mean, if you want to connect with people around this issue of ageism, well, please feel free to just use it. You can see in the little map at the bottom of the slide that this is from Google Analytics. So the website links were shared and visited in tons of countries, and it was definitely not limited to Europe. Which actually makes sense, because ageism is not a European issue at all, and it's actually, well, to me it was kind of thrilling to see that actually we could actually go beyond our tiny little world and actually team up for something that would be bigger than just us. This is what is possible with online campaigning. So it's obviously very, again, thrilling and exciting. At the same time, online campaigning has a lot of limits and biases that we should be aware of. And I'll touch upon this probably in a more conclusive note. So in terms of lessons learned, the main lesson for us was probably that it was important to bring this discussion around aging and ageism into this bigger frame of human rights. The 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was celebrated last year was a beautiful opportunity for this, and it actually made great sense. It made sense when we designed the campaign, but at the end of the campaign we were like, yeah, okay. I mean, we could not have anticipated that it would make so much sense to actually put this campaign into that frame. It was a unique opportunity. We managed to have some momentum, and we will definitely keep working around ageism with this human rights approach, because no one wants to lose his or her human rights, and somehow, especially in our European Western societies, we probably take it for granted. Obviously, it depends on the group you feel you belong to, but many of us are quite privileged in Europe, and for some people, ageism is probably the only discrimination that they will experience. So it's definitely a different dynamic that we need to develop here to make sure that people that have always been privileged, that maybe are not aware that they were privileged, or that they were lucky enough not to see their human rights denied or at threat, may experience ageism at some point. And how do we build this activism and campaigning and community of activists with such a diversity of privileged Europeans, with people that may have experienced other kind of discrimination, like racism, sexism, homophobia, again, you name it. So yeah, this human rights approach is key, or was key to us, to make sure that we would be as inclusive as possible when we address ageism. This is probably the most important slide, or the one that for me, if I had been asked by Hannah just to rush in and to limit myself to only a couple of slides, this would have definitely been part of the mix, because I could not anticipate this, at least not to this extent, that campaigning was actually an empowerment process, and it's campaigning is actually very powerful for different reasons that I detail here. The first one is that it helps people to relate to others' experiences of aging. So we are all aging. This is something like that affects everyone, but at the same time, because it affects everyone, we tend to just forget about it, because it's not a distinctive element of our identity. The distinctive element of our identity is the chronological age that we are. So similarly to the fact that when you travel to another country, you'll be like, oh, but they eat this for dinner or they eat this for breakfast. So you will see the difference in what is in the plate, but you will not necessarily see that you both are having 3 meals a day, for instance. So here, similarly with aging, you will see that this person is, I don't know, 20 years older than you are, but you will not see that the two of you are actually aging. So with campaigning and with these stories that you share, it actually helps relating to one another experiences. Then it helps sharing, campaigning permits to share evidences, good practices, tools, and tips. So it's about this networking added value that I was mentioning earlier. It's very important because there are tons of beautiful ideas out there. I mean, again, I'm the one talking today, but I'm sure that you also have tons of examples in mind of this poster that was having a very good slogan that you've seen in your hometown, or about, I don't know, this TED talk that you've seen on YouTube the last day. So I'm sure that there are plenty of initiatives that would be worth being known, but they're limited in their audience. So campaigning is also an opportunity to create some buzz at some point and make sure that that there will be this single entry point where you will be able to to find all the knowledge and the initiatives, the inspiring actions that are that exist here and there, and that you can elaborate on to also to yourself also take action. The third point is that campaigning helps developing a sense of belonging to a community. Again, here, because we are all aging, it's difficult, and because aging is a dynamic process, it's not a group that we somehow we all belong to this group of people that are aging, but at the same time we do not all belong, or we do not all feel yet that we belong to this group of older people. So it's actually quite difficult or quite specific to campaigning against ageism, that we must develop a sense of belonging, knowing the specificities and the peculiarities of the aging process. At the same time, because we share experiences of aging, we share testimonies of ageism as well. This can help relate to the experience of someone else, and then we feel less alone. We do not take it as something normal, because I was telling earlier that the United Nations independent expert was saying that ageism is still socially accepted and usually unchallenged because it's unconscious bias and prejudices that are so pervasive and so embedded in our mindsets, that we tend to think that if something happened to us that is ageist, or if we go through an ageist experience, we might not acknowledge or recognize that this is ageism. And the fact that someone will label this experience or this very similar experience as something not normal, something that is ageist, something that is excluding me, or that is denying my rights, then maybe I'll start to actually bring back this unconscious ageism that I have at the back of my head to the forefront, to the awareness part of my knowledge, and actually believe that I could also be part of this group of people that are aging, and that it's not because I'm aging that I should be denied my human rights, or that I should be excluded, or that I should be undervalued, or that I should be a second-class citizen. And the final point that I wanted to touch upon is campaigning helps us to be aware of what we can do together and what we can achieve together. It's incredibly powerful to actually team up and be like, okay, because we team up, we can say the exact same thing that we were all saying before, but when we were scattered and when we didn't know each other, now that the fact that we are saying the exact same thing, even if we are the exact same amount of people, the fact that we are saying it together, it makes it incredibly more powerful. And then we realized what we could achieve together if we were just synchronizing our actions, if we were just sharing tools and tips and not reinventing the wheel each time we try to do something. It's the power of collective action, and I'm a strong believer of this. So I just wanted to share that with you as well. This is also the reason why I'm actually giving this webinar today. So before we move to the more discussion part of the webinar, I have a last poll for you. Yeah, thank you. So I'll just read the question. Is there a specific way of campaigning against ageism in comparison to campaigning against other forms of discrimination, like sexism or racism, for instance? Yes, no, have never thought about it before. Okay. Thank you, Hannah. So it seems like half of you think that there is indeed a specific way of campaigning against ageism, but like quite a substantive amount of you as well never thought about it before, which is totally fine. I asked this question because this is clearly a challenge to me. Again, this was the first time that Age was running such a global awareness raising campaign last year. And we were very pleased with the results, but we actually also faced some challenges in terms of how to build this group of anti-ageism activists, because again, aging is something that is dynamic, and it's not as clear as I identify as a woman or I identify as a man. I'm not saying that campaigning against sexism or racism is easy. I'm just saying that there are specificities in campaigning against ageism. So maybe just as a conclusion before we move to the discussion, the next steps. So in the long run, what we want is to push for a paradigm shift towards a human rights approach that focuses on the empowerment of all the people, as I was saying, and the valorization of their capacity to live independently and contribute to society. We want as well to sustain the newly established community of activists, so we eventually achieve to reach this critical mass that I was mentioning before that is necessary to address discrimination and human rights violation. And finally, we want to mainstream ageism to address it in intersection with other discrimination faced by different groups in society. And in the short run, maybe you know that this man on the right-hand side of the slide, Robert Butler, 50 years ago, he was the first to coin the term ageism. So for this 50th anniversary, let's say, we thought that 2019, would be the opportunity to explain again what is ageism, why the word exists, why does it exist in English, and why doesn't it exist yet in some other languages? Would it be worth developing or translating this word in other languages to give a bit more visibility to the phenomenon? So this is something that we have in the pipeline as for age. And in the short run as well, we will reiterate the call for a new United Nations Convention for the Protection of Human Rights of People as they age. So the objective will be to basically echo the voices of this woken up anti-ageism community at the United Nations level, and Age with other non-governmental organizations will participate in the 10th open-ended working group on aging that will take place in April. So we'll definitely keep you posted as well with that regard. So I'll stop here. I have probably tons of other things that I wanted to tell you. Just keep in mind that ageism, campaigning is something that can take tons of different forms. I think the few examples that I've listed earlier show you that, and it's also a blurry concept, but take it as an advantage so that you can make it your own. It can be online campaigning, it can be marching, it can be sit-in, it can be. So yeah, just I'm happy to hear what are your beautiful ideas.
Thank you, Estelle, for that awesome presentation. It was great to learn about the work of Age Platform around the AgeingEqual campaign, as well as your learnings on what went well and your 4 rules. So we still have a few more minutes for questions. If anybody in the audience has any, please feel free to submit them through the question and answer box or the chat, and we'll go through them. And if we run out of time, that's no problem. We'll just answer them via email and share them with you afterwards. But to start off, as I was listening, I was impressed by how the collaborations between the groups was maintained throughout the entire AgeingEqual campaign. And I was wondering if you could maybe expand about how developing partnerships and collaborations while campaigning worked and how you continue to engage them throughout the process.
Yeah, okay. So initially we approached bilaterally some of our long-standing partners. So I was mentioning the European Disability Forum, for instance, but it was also the case of the European Women's Lobby or as well beyond the European borders. We approached the NGOs that we cooperate with at the United Nations level, etc. And we were explaining to them what was our intersectional approach in this campaign and asking them whether they would like to contribute with a blog post or things like that. So just sharing their resources if they had thought about this before, or just maybe to initiate a discussion with their membership so that they could feed us with testimonies. And then during the campaign, so first the fact that we were basically giving them the floor was the opportunity for them as well to share an opinion that they could have written for our blog. So it was easier for them to be able to share something that they owned. It was not them sharing some age content. It was them sharing their content, but taking place in the frame of our campaign. So that was one thing. And the other thing that was that during the campaign, then we were sharing regular updates about what was coming up, what would be the topic of next week, what are the few social media posts that we have drafted for this specific theme, so that people would be as well comfortable just knowing what was in preparation for the coming week, and that they could as well have time a bit to reflect and prepare for the coming themes.
That's awesome. Thank you. Similar to that, someone in the audience just asked if there was any way that you can measure the impact and change around the ageism issue at this time, and specifically through and while you're campaigning.
That's super difficult to do. Measuring social change in general is something like very, very difficult to do, not only in relation to campaigning, but also in relation to policy work. But I would say that this is a very personal feeling, but after the campaign, and I'm still amazed by the people that are just sending me emails saying, "Oh, I've discovered your website. This is beautiful. Can we have like an interview in this newspaper, or can we have I don't know, you explaining to us how you run this campaign, or it's this people approaching you that you didn't know about before." This is one thing. Then you realize that actually you may have reached out to newcomers in this debate, which is good. And then it's also in relationship to our more institutional partners, that it will also be, it might also have impacts in the long run, because we run this campaign. Now we can show that we will not only rely on the more diplomatic way of doing advocacy work, relying on policy papers and that kind of things. Obviously, lobbying behind closed doors can be very helpful and very impactful, but we will not only rely on this. So if we see that we are blocked at some point in that way, we can also envisage a complementary approach or an alternative approach that could be campaigning. And this is as well, it's difficult to measure how impactful this can be, or if it was already having some impact. But this is good that now we can just, it's like if we had a new tool in our toolbox.
That's great to know and great to hear your opinion on. And I think if it's okay, we'll do one more question just because we are at the 1 hour mark of the webinar. And it's from someone in Canada who was wondering if you've heard any other examples of campaigning from within Canada specifically, or perhaps if you have a list of resources or campaigns that have been taking place maybe on the Age platform website.
So our campaign website was not really like a repository of, well, we do have a good practice section on the website, but it was not a repository of resources around ageism like you can have others. But maybe you'd like to check the old school platform that is just compiling all these beautiful resources around aging and ageism. As for Canada, well, very recently I've heard that Le Gang des Vieux en Colère, that is this Belgium initiative, they've been approached by some people, some older people, some self-advocates in Canada to replicate the initiative. So this is probably something that will develop. It's probably in the French-speaking part of the country because of the language issue or language barrier, obviously. But yeah, I'm sure that there are tons of things out there that I'm not even aware of, but I'm happy to put you in touch with the person running the old school platform if you want, or to ask to the Gang des Vieux en Colère, who are those self-advocates in Canada that would like to develop a similar civil disobedient group.
Great, thank you. And for everyone interested, we will share a link of the AgeingEqual website to those practices when we send out the webinar recording and the slides after. And I just want to thank Estelle again for your presentation today. It was great to learn more about how campaigning can impact perceptions around age, especially those prejudices and stereotypes. And that is everything. So thank you all for joining us, and IFA looks forward to having you in the next webinar in the future.
Thank you, Anna.